মনোজ স্পিকার ছাড়া সবার
We are on a live.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Center for Governance Studies. It is well known that COVID-19 pandemic has posed enormous challenges to every nation around the world. Some countries have been more negatively affected by the crisis than others. Among others, Bangladesh is suffering the most in the different sectors, including the economy, public health, governance and transparency, climate change and disaster management, local government and food security. It is notable that Bangladesh recently faced the worst and maybe the longest flood after 1988, according to the UN. The center observes that the policymakers' lack of assessments and resolutions, and there is an information gap among stakeholders regarding preparedness for natural disasters and the pandemic. According to a recent study by the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, IDMC, approximately 25 lakhs 20,000 people have been displaced internally between January 2020 to June 2020 due to natural calamities that Bangladesh faced. As I said earlier, that the COVID-19 pandemic has created an unprecedented global economic and humanitarian crisis that has enormous impacts on both lives and livelihoods. As a developing economy, the magnitude of impacts has overwhelmed the country greatly, although Bangladesh is not new to disasters or major humanitarian crises. Such an unprecedented crisis brought up the fragile condition to the climate vulnerable groups, especially to the poor women, children, and elderly, etc. Those climate vulnerable people mostly suffered from joblessness, loss of income, and food insecurity. It is high time Bangladesh should also assess climate change and disaster management challenges on such crises like COVID-19 to prevent any probable future crisis like this. With the support of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP in Bangladesh, the Center for Governance Studies, CGS, has initiated a project to develop a series of policy briefs to assess the loopholes and challenges of Bangladesh. Under the series, Dr. Atiq Rahman, Executive Director, Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, BCAS, and Chairman of the Climate Action Network South Asia, CANSA, has developed a policy brief on climate change titled Searching Ways Forward for Bangladesh in the Time of Pandemic, Climate Change, and Disaster Management Challenges in Bangladesh. Today, we are going to release the fifth policy brief, and it's now available on our website. On the occasion of releasing the policy brief on climate change, the center has organized this online discussion event. This event is now live on different social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And indeed, we are happy that today we have with us Dr. Atiq Rahman, the author of the policy brief, architect Mubashir Sain, President of Institute of Architects Bangladesh, Ms. Soda Rizwana Hassan, Chief Executive Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, BELA, and Dr. Manjur Ahmed Chaudhary, Chairman, Center for Governance Studies. And now, here is our key speaker, author of the policy brief, Dr. Atiq Rahman, Executive Director, Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, and Chairman of the Climate Action Network South Asia. Dr. Atiq Rahman.
Thank you very much, Zulu. Great pleasure to be here. Over the years, about 2 months ago, I was commissioned to write on the overall situation of climate change in the COVID world, and also the implication of disaster management and in Bangladesh. As we all know, climate change is the greatest threat that mankind faces now, but at the same time, we have had one of the almost unknown for the last 1 century, the emergence of the COVID-19, which has shattered all aspects of all societies, rich, poor, children, adult, cutting across the whole society and human beings. So combination of those two creates a very complex and more complicated ways of managing climate change in the world of COVID, or COVID climate together in a world of disaster management. Now, climate change implications for ordinary people is it means is the greenhouse gases that come out of our energy processes, our development processes, our burning and our livelihood. But that temperature rise doesn't affect directly the people. What people, country like Bangladesh, which is one of the most vulnerable countries, get affected is through the means of disaster management. And in Bangladesh, the disasters are across the country, across all sectors, and it manifests in many ways. And climate change is the motivating factor in many, many cases. For example, in Bangladesh area, within that geography, from 1999, i.e. end of the last century, to 2019, which is the first 2 decades, 191 disasters have taken place associated with climate events or hydroclimatic regimes, that is water, climate, atmosphere, society, culture, trees, plants, water, land, the whole system. So that is affecting people differentially, and the most vulnerable people are the poorest. And as we know, other studies of Sanem and others have shown that during this period, from March, actively, but starting from December, but basically March 2021 to present time, we have had a large number up to 20 to 21. We had a large number of events which are climate in origin, but implication of climate change. I'll just give the example of a woman who I know and I have worked in the villages, and I asked her, and many of you know that we had 4 consecutive floods over the last 8 months, over a period of five months. And these consecutive floods are a convergence of the South Asian China, so it's India, Arunachal, Meghalaya, Assam, that whole northeast area with China, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, all the water emerging through Bangladesh, going through Brahmaputra, going across Ganges and coming into Padma and re-entering and joining with Brahmaputra again. That whole process has inundated huge number of areas, affected particularly the farmers, and in the agricultural production, our rice crop time, and that has also devastated the vegetables and others. So I was talking to one of the women saying, how are you doing with COVID in this problematic area? And she said, I am living for 4 months with water between my knee and my waist. I don't have the luxury to look at COVID. So for her, the reality that confronted her was her life survival. And she had to, when the water came above her waist, above her shoulder, she had to go to the roadside to take shelter. Once it comes down, she comes back, but another comes, and she is next to Kurigram. So this has been coming and going. So that complex system is a system where all the complexities that arise. And in climate change, if you look from south of Bay of Bengal going up north, we have identified 12 very well defined climate problems or complex vulnerability which Bangladesh faces, from sea level rise, increasing salinity, the storm surge with cyclones entering, and we had Amphan during this period as well, one of the great cyclones. Then when these cyclones, then we have the drought in the northeast in the Barinda area, which gets dire, and we have water shortage. Then in the Chittagong Hill tracts, there are landslides, and along the rivers, the river bank erosion is very, very big, including Chorland breaking down and getting displaced, and the vulnerability of all that, including our water security, food security, energy security, security of land and existence of our habitat. So everything gets connected through the climate change process, but this happens in a time of COVID where we have to be extremely careful, maintain distance. Now, maintaining distance is what we have been promising and we want everybody to do. And I was talking to some people in the slums and they said, well, you suggest us maintaining distance, but 5 of us live in a room with 8 feet by 8 feet. And the question of having that separation is not some luxury again we can afford. But fortunately, our slum areas, our poor people has not, or in the rural areas, has not been as badly affected. And we have been fortunate. There are theories and various explanations or hypotheses, but the scientific data is not as strong to say why and how Bangladesh poor have survived so well over this period and started recovering their agricultural practices. So we did not have a shortage of food during this time, not that serious a shortage, but we have had been affected. So that is the vulnerability. Besides vulnerability, we have had climate change impacts, and the major climate issues face Bangladesh and the present and the future, and the disaster management has been working hard over this period. Now, fortunately, Bangladesh is one of the few countries in the world which has a ministry of disaster management, and they can reach quite quickly into the community, to the people. Government in the local level, the Upazala system, the union system, the delivery system is working better than before. But on the other hand, during the COVID period, it's very difficult for people to go with the boat to deeper islands or access deeper areas in this uncertainty where we cannot be too close to people and too close to give the service. So some of the services have been restricted, but the allocation was there, and then there has been some limitation to the allocation reaching the right people. And the key priorities and strategies in Bangladesh has been some of the central issues that we have to look. And our key priority in climate change world is what we call adaptation, how we adjust to the realities. Banglai bolche khap khaiye neya. How do we adjust to the new realities that have come? So people, and it is the communities again, it is the poor who have increased their innovation to look at the realities of climate change. They don't talk in terms of climate change, they talk in terms of their life being affected. And their life is being affected when the water goes up, when in the Jessore area, people have been saying there is a fog that comes in the evening, which was not something they knew before. So these are all, and the dust of the Rajshahi area affect the people's life and livelihood. And as we know, Dhaka city is the second worst city in terms of the pollution of the air, which is basically particulate matter coming out of our quote-unquote unsustainable development process of bricks being burned, industries polluting the rivers as well as the air, our households infusing and burning. All that adds to our life and livelihood and affects it. The response strategy in Bangladesh has been quite good, mobilizing the people, communities themselves, the NGOs, the civil society, the central government, hand in hand, has been working together under this very difficult circumstances. And the impact of COVID particularly has made the urban elite to be in their homes most of the time. So if you remember, in the early days of COVID, when there were not so many cars on the road, not so many people going out, suddenly you could see new flowers blooming in various roadsides of Dhaka. We are having grass coming out where water quality, air quality had improved slightly. Again, the water quality remains a major challenge in our lives. The response strategy, we have done a large number of studies, the Bangladesh government, NGOs, civil society researchers. In adaptation, we are the world leaders. As you might recall, when Ban Ki-moon was here a few months ago, he said, Bangladesh is our best teacher for adaptation. And that has happened because of the combination of government's leadership, working of the scientific community who has given the scientific leadership, and fortunately we had few of the scientific leaders of the world in there and made adaptation on the global front through actions. And these actions have been combination of our own development pathway, and at the same time we had rapid economic growth. And we do need rapid economic growth to reduce our poverty, and poverty is our biggest challenge that we have to overcome. That's the central point of our development strategy. So the poor must be helped to come out of poverty. Once they're out of poverty, they enter the market, they buy the commodities, and they contribute to the economy. So this cycle, from going from vicious to the virtuous cycle, is what we need to do, and that has been happening. Sadly, when these four big floods combined with the fifth flood, which was the depression formed in the southern Bay of Bengal and did not allow the water to pass through, so the water backlog had created a fifth, and the delayed release that has imparted the flow of water could not come out easily, and had a sort of a fifth or 4.5 floods. And over these 5 months, people had the combination of COVID plus the floods, and a unique situation. Even if the best scientists of the world wanted to design a disastrous situation, they could not design anything more complex or more better, or quote unquote better, because of the nature had given us such a challenge. Fortunately, we overcame that challenge. Our food, the farmers went back, the vegetables were started coming, and now the vegetables we see in the market is basically a function of the early action of the people. So the people, communities, as the local government, central government, NGOs, civil society, intellectuals, researchers, all jumping back and doing in this constrained situation is what we hopefully we got out of the problem in the most critical way. Now, Bangladesh has a number of strategies, an action plan, the National Adaptation Plan, Bangladesh strategic climate change, a strategy action plan. We have the gender action plan on climate. We have the finance activities. Ministry of Finance has shown how climate is affecting it. And as a crude value, 1.5% of our GDP gets undermined by climate impact. So we have all that combining and affecting our life, and we have to come out of this in a situation. But let's remember, climate change is global, COVID is global. By isolating Bangladesh, solving the problem is not a global is a solution. So we had, out of this global situation, the Trump's world of bad leadership was giving a challenge to the world. Fortunately, Biden has come, re-entered the Paris Agreement, and started acting and saying that within the 20-25 years, they will become all electric cars, 10 million jobs created. Now, that is a hopeful sign from the rich countries who have to solve the problem first. We cannot solve the problem. We can only survive the critical period. The problem has to be solved by the people who are emitting the real amount. Now, whole of Bangladesh, what we emit? Whole of Bangladesh, 170 million people, 17 koti log. What we emit is not much more than what New York and an adjacent city just emit. So Doctor, it is not us that can make the emission issue, but we are doing the nationally determined contribution and doing our responsibility. As you know, that the solar photovoltaic, solar energy,
Dr. Aman,
or electricity.
Could you please make it short and we'll hear?
Yes,
from,
I'll just finish it. Yeah, we started very small. Now, 55 million people, 5.5 million household is using solar energy in Bangladesh, highest in the world, being the poorest country. So we are giving some solutions. We are showing the pathway, but above all, we have to adapt, and our development pathway must continue. We must continue in the path of rapid economic development vis-a-vis our economic and sustainable development. That's the way forward. We have to put our heads and hearts and action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atiq Rahman. We'll hear more from you later. I hope you all enjoyed his great presentation. And now I would like to request Ms. Soda Rizwana Hassan, Chief Executive, Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, BELA, to deliver her speech. Ms. Rizwana Hassan, it's over to you.
Right. I will actually have to do it later because I'm entering for a court hearing now. Okay. So it's okay.
Can you give us 5 minutes? Then
I cannot because I'm entering the court hearing now. Okay. So maybe I should be the last speaker. You have a panel of discussion, so I can be the last panelist. Okay.
Okay, please join us as soon as possible.
Let's take that.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Great. May I request now Dr. Munjur Ahmed Chaudhary, a renowned entomologist and the chairman of the Center for Governance Studies, to take his microphone. Dr. Munjur Chaudhary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jilur Rahman. I must at first appreciate Dr. Atiq Rahman for his insightful presentation. He covered almost all aspects of this climate crisis, I should say. And Dr. Atiq Rahman is one of the pioneering scientists in this country who raised awareness about climate crisis, climate change, environmental issues. The way, Eugene Odom of University of Georgia and his brother H.T. Odom tried to raise awareness in the US half a century ago. At that time, people did not pay much attention to their warnings, and they introduced the idea of energy flow through the trophic levels in the ecosystem, because energy is very important, and they first realized. And what happened is that this unbridled use of energy in the Western countries has created a global problem. This is a global problem, but caused by few countries, few rich countries. We are now paying in developing countries, paying heavily. There is a clear case of, climate disparity, because these dire consequences, falling heavily on the poor people, in fact, all people in this country. I just appreciate what Dr. Atiq Rahman said. I would simply add one point here, is that the climate injustice meted out to the people of Bangladesh and people like other people like Bangladeshi people who live in coastal areas. In fact, Bangladesh is the ground zero of climate risk. In fact, one organization in German they ranked Bangladesh is the 6th most riskiest climate crisis country presently. So there is some disparity. For example, I would simply add few statistics just to bolster Dr. Atiq Rahman's point, that in terms of consumption, take for example about the car. Average US citizen during his or her lifetime will own 9.4 cars. Compared to this figure with that of a Bangladeshi average person. Why I am talking about cars? Because the car has a huge carbon footprint. A car which has a lifetime of about 11 years will produce about 24 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is one of the most, serious greenhouse gases. So there is another data, for example, the electricity consumption. We consume on a per capita basis about more than 400 kilowatt hour per year. In USA, electricity consumption is 12,000 kilowatt per hour. So why electricity? Because electricity and heat generation cause about 28% of the greenhouse gases. The emission, Dr. Atiq Rahman mentioned that our contribution is negligible. On a per capita basis, we emit only roughly 5.5 or half metric ton of carbon greenhouse gases. Compared to these, US citizens per capita basis emit 31 metric tons of greenhouse gas. There is a clear case of injustice. I should say injustice, because they are consuming these kind of resources, creating problems, and we are suffering. What will happen? The consequences is dire. There is a lot of predictions about so far since the pre-industrialization time, 1850 to 1900. During the last 1 century, there is a rise of 1 degree Celsius mean temperature of this world, of this earth. And the projection is this: before this century is out, there will be an increase of at least from 1.8 to 4 degrees Celsius. If there is 1 degree increase, there is 1 degree increase of temperature, Bangladesh, there will be about 30 centimeter to 50 centimeter sea level rise. And our at least 11 to 15% of our coastal area will be submerged. It is not only submerged, there is this intrusion of salinity, intrusion, this congestion, drainage congestion, other factors, extreme weather events. For example, last year we had 4 cyclones, major cyclones. Normally we should have 1 cyclone. For example, here the late winter rainfall is becoming more and more common. As a result of these, the breeding of Culex mosquitoes increased, because, for example, this year's Culex infestation is one of the causes is the late December untimely rainfall. This erratic rainfall, drought, etc., will affect all parts of Bangladesh. Our lifestyle, our living standards will be greatly affected. So I would not take much time, because he has already covered these whole issues, the mitigation, this adaptation. Yes, we are very good at adaptation, but the point is this: it requires a lot of funds, and also the management of the funds in a corruption-free way is also important. We should encourage our foreign ministry to gear their, to train their diplomats about this climate diplomacy. This is the year of climate diplomacy. For example, this in America, John Kerry, who was the Secretary of State, the top diplomat, he is now their climate climate secretary for USA. So we must give more emphasis on this point. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. At this moment of the discussion, I'd like to request Architect Mubashir Hussain, President Institute of Architects Bangladesh, to take the floor. Mr. Mubashir Hussain, it's over to you.
Thank you. জিল্লুর, আমি বাংলায় বলবো, কারণ বাংলায় বললে আমি একটু সঠিকভাবে উপস্থাপন করতে পারি। প্রথমে আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাই আতিকুর রহমান এবং মঞ্জুর চৌধুরী, বিশেষ করে আতিকুর রহমান সাহেব যে বক্তব্যগুলি দিয়েছেন সেগুলি একেবারে ডাটা বেস, এবং সবচেয়ে বেশি আমাকে আকর্ষিত করেছে একটি শব্দ। উনি বলেছেন COVID-19 is global, climate change is global, but very interesting thing, climate change is global, but it has been done by, created by, I should say, the rich people, and we are suffering. আর কোভিডটা হচ্ছে, এটা আমরা ধরে নিতে পারি যে প্রাকৃতিক ভাবে এই দুর্যোগটি এসেছে। ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জটাকে কিন্তু অ্যাডাপ্টেবিলিটি বাংলাদেশের মানুষ প্রতি ধাপে ধাপে এটা অ্যাডাপ্ট করা শুরু করেছে প্রতিটি ক্ষেত্রেই। এখন ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ এবং এই কোভিড যখন প্যারালালি বাংলাদেশে এসছে, তখন আমরা একটি অদ্ভুত, আমি অন্তত যে স্টাডিটি করেছি, আমি একটি অদ্ভুত স্টাডি দেখেছি। ঢাকা শহর বা শহরগুলিতে কোভিডের আক্রমণ অসম্ভব বেশি, যেমন আতিক ভাই সরাসরি বলেছেন যে বস্তি এলাকায় কোভিড নাই কেন, কেন কম, এই উত্তরগুলি আমরা কিন্তু এখনো পাইনি। গ্রামগুলিতে গেলে পরে আপনি দেখতে পাবেন সেটি একটি আশ্চর্য ঘটনা। অন্তত আমি 6টা-7টা গ্রাম নিয়ে কাজ করেছি, সেখানে আমি দেখতে পেয়েছি গ্রামের লোক গ্রামে গেলে পারে, কোনো শহর থেকে গেলে পারে, গ্রামের লোক তাকে আইসোলেটেড করে রাখে সেই বাড়িটিকে, যে তুমি শহর থেকে কোভিড নিয়ে এসছো আমাদের গ্রামে। গ্রামের লোকের কোভিড নিয়ে মাথা ব্যথা নাই, তারা এই ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ নিয়ে কিভাবে অ্যাডাপ্ট অ্যাডাপ্টেশনের মাধ্যমে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জকে গ্রহণ করে নিয়ে নিজেদের অবস্থানকে সুদৃঢ় করবে, এবং সুদৃঢ় যে তারা করতে পারে তার একটি এক্সাম্পল আমি মনে করি এখানে দেওয়া উচিত। সেটি হচ্ছে যে দেখেন, দেশ যখন স্বাধীন হয় তখন আমার জনসংখ্যা ছিল 7 কোটি, জমি ছিল অঢেল, যে জমি কোনো ইন্ডাস্ট্রি ছিল না, দালান কোঠা ছিল না, জমি অঢেল, জনসংখ্যা 7 কোটি, and the country was declared bottomless basket. We didn't have food. আর আজকে 50 বছর পরে যখন জনসংখ্যা দ্বিগুণ, জমি অর্ধেক, এই কৃষক যাদেরকে সুযোগ পেলেই আমরা চাষা বলে গালি দেই, সবচেয়ে নেগলেক্টেড পোর্শন অফ দ্য পিপল অফ দ্য কান্ট্রি, দে হ্যাভ চেঞ্জ দ্য হোল সিনারিও। বাংলাদেশকে খাদ্যে স্বয়ংসম্পূর্ণ করে ফেলেছে। ওই যে আতিক ভাই একটি কথা বললো যে বাংলাদেশের মানুষের ভিতরে যে অ্যাডাপ্টিবিলিটি, ক্রিয়েটিভ চিন্তা তাদের নিজেদের, সেই কাজটিকে তারা কিন্তু অসম্ভব শক্তির সাথে করে ফেলতে পারে। এই ফ্লাড, একটি ফ্লাডের জায়গায় 4টি ফ্লাড, আর 50 বছর আগে একটি ফ্লাড হলে পারে কত লোক মারা যেত, কত লোক না খেয়ে থাকতো, কত দুর্ভিক্ষ হতো। এখন 4টি ফ্লাডও কিন্তু মানুষ শক্ত হয়ে দাঁড়াচ্ছে, ফ্লাডের সাথে তাকে অ্যাডাপ্টেবিলিটি ডেভেলপ করতে পারছে। আমরা এই কোভিড নিয়েও যদি আমরা চিন্তা করি, গ্রামের লোক, এখন আমার মাঝে মাঝে মনে হয় ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জই কি বাংলাদেশের গ্রামের মানুষকে কোভিড থেকে মুক্ত রেখেছে? ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জই কি বাংলাদেশের মানুষকে, এগুলি রিসার্চের ব্যাপার, কেন গ্রামের মানুষ কিছুতেই কোভিড আক্রান্ত হচ্ছে না? 1, 2 নম্বর হচ্ছে তারা শহর থেকে গেলে পারে বলে তুমি কোভিড নিয়ে এসছো। হ্যাঁ, কোভিড এর এফেক্ট তাদের উপরে হচ্ছে। তাদের সন্তানরা দেশ বিদেশে কাজ করত, তাদের সন্তানরা ঢাকা শহরে কাজ করত, তারা জবলেস হয়ে গেছে, যার এফেক্টটি মারাত্মক ভাবে, আতিক ভাই এই কথাটিও বলে, মারাত্মক ভাবে গ্রাম বস্তি এই জায়গাগুলিতে এফেক্ট করেছে। প্রথম দিকে বস্তিবাসী যারা মানুষের বাড়িতে বাড়িতে কাজ করত, বাড়িতে বাড়িতে কাজ দেওয়া পর্যন্ত বন্ধ হয়ে গিয়েছিল, কারণ সবার ধারণা ছিল যে কোভিডটি আমার বাড়িতে ঢুকবে বস্তির ওই কাজের গুয়ার হাত দিয়ে। কিন্তু আমরা দেখতে পেলাম উল্টা, আমরা বাসায় যারা একেবারে সব রকম ব্যবস্থাপনা নিয়ে মাস্ক থেকে আরম্ভ করে ঘন্টায় ঘন্টায় হাত সাবান দিয়ে ধুয়ে কোভিড মুক্ত থাকার চেষ্টা করেছি, দেখেছি আমাদেরই ছেলে মেয়েদের, আমাদের কোভিড আক্রান্ত হয়েছি। কাজের বুয়া কিন্তু মুখে একটা মাস্ক লাগিয়ে বাড়ির সমস্ত কাজ করে আবার চলে যাচ্ছে। এই যে এই জায়গাটিতে নিয়ে আমি মনে করি একটি রিসার্চ হওয়া দরকার। কেন, কি কারণে বাংলাদেশের মানুষের ভিতরে এই ক্ষমতাটি আসলো, কোত্থেকে আসলো, কিসের কারণে? এটা কি ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের কারণে? তাহলে কি আমরা ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জকে স্বাগত জানাবো? যত ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ হবে বাংলাদেশের মানুষের শক্তি, মানসিক শক্তি এবং শারীরিক শক্তি বৃদ্ধি পাবে না, মানুষ এটাকে অ্যাডাপ্ট করা শিখেছে। দেখেন, আগে একটি ঝড় হতো, একটি ঝড়ে 100-150 লোক মারা যাওয়ার ইতিহাস আছে। বাংলাদেশের প্রথম ইলেকশন পিছানোর পিছনে এই ঝড় কাজ করেছিল। এখন এরকম কতগুলি ঝড় হচ্ছে, আমরা মৃত্যুর সংখ্যা নাই বললেই চলে। কারণ আমি এই কোস্টাল এরিয়াতে প্রচুর কাজ করেছি, সাইক্লোন শেল্টার গুলি ডিজাইন করেছি, সেখানকার মানুষদের তথ্য আমাকে সংগ্রহ করতে হয়েছে। এখন আপনি চিন্তা করতে পারেন, এবং তারা তাদের বাড়ি ছেড়ে সাইক্লোন শেল্টারে কোনো অবস্থায় আসতো না। কি, আমার তো বাঁচার কোনো মূল্য নাই যদি আমার গরুগুলি মারা যায়, আমার হাঁস মুরগি যদি মারা যায়, আই ডোন্ট ওয়ান্ট টু লিভ। ফলে আমাদেরকে সাইক্লোন শেল্টার যখন আমরা করেছি, এই ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের কারণে আমাকে কিন্তু তাদের গরু ছাগলের থাকার ব্যবস্থা করে তাদেরকে নিয়ে আসতে আমরা সুযোগ করেছি। এবং ড্রিঙ্কিং ওয়াটার, এখন আসেন, সারা পৃথিবীতে বৃষ্টির পানি ব্যবহার করা যায় না এই শহরগুলিতে, বিকজ অফ দ্য অ্যাসিড রেইন। আর আমি ঢাকা শহরের বৃষ্টির পানি 5 থেকে 7 মিনিট পরে পানিটি ধরে কলেরা রিসার্চে টেস্ট করিয়েছি। ইট বিকামস ডিস্টিল ওয়াটার, ইউ ক্যান ইউজ ইট ফর দ্য ইনজেকশন। বিকজ বাংলাদেশে এখনো কেমিক্যাল ইন্ডাস্ট্রি, কেমিক্যালের ধোঁয়া, এবং বাংলাদেশের বৃষ্টি এখনো আপনার কেমিক্যাল বৃষ্টি হয় না। অর্থাৎ এই বৃষ্টির পানিকে আমি আমাদের দৈনন্দিন জীবনে ব্যবহার করতে পারি। কিন্তু সবচেয়ে দুঃখজনক ব্যাপার হলো, উই স্পেন্ড মানি ঢাকা শহরে বা প্রত্যেকটি শহরে, উই স্পেন্ড মানি বৃষ্টির মানি ছাদ থেকে নামিয়ে রাস্তায় ফেলে দেওয়া। অর্থাৎ সৃষ্টির সবচেয়ে মূল্যবান পানিটিকে আমরা পয়সা খরচ করে ড্রেনে ফেলি, আর ওয়াসার পলিউটেড পানিকে আমি পয়সা খরচ করে টেনে নিয়ে আসি। হোয়াই? এটার উত্তর কে দিবে? এই অ্যাওয়ারনেসটা কে ডেভেলপ করাবে? পৃথিবী টেমস নদীকে পরিচ্ছন্ন করতে আমার 20 বছর সময় লেগেছে। বাংলাদেশে আমরা গতবার প্রচন্ড বৃষ্টি হওয়ার কারণে আমরা দেখেছি 1 বছরেই বুড়িগঙ্গা, পলিউটেড বুড়িগঙ্গার নদীর নিচ দিক দেখা যাচ্ছে। অর্থাৎ বাংলাদেশে এই ঢাকা শহরে পৃথিবীর কোথাও চারপাশে 5টা নদী আছে একটি রাজধানীতে, আমার জানা নাই। এবং এই নদীগুলি হলো মিষ্টি পানি, অর্থাৎ সুইট ওয়াটার। পৃথিবীতে 3য় বিশ্বযুদ্ধ হলে এই সুইট ওয়াটারের মালিকানা নিয়ে হবে। কথায় কথা আমরা সিঙ্গাপুরের কথা বলি, এই সিঙ্গাপুর পানি কোথা থেকে নিয়ে আসে? সেই পানি নিয়ে আসে সে মালয়েশিয়া থেকে। আর এখন তারা যে পানিগুলি দৈনন্দিন ব্যবহার হয় তারা সেটাকে রিসাইক্লিং করছে। সেখানে যদি আপনারা যান, প্রতিদিন 200-300 বাচ্চা ছেলে মেয়েদেরকে বলাচ্ছে তুমি পায়খানা পেশাবে যে পানি ফেলো সেইটা আমরা রিসাইক্লিং করে পিওর ড্রিঙ্কিং ওয়াটার করে কিছুটা পলিউশন করতে হয় যাতে তোমার শরীরের শক্তি তৈরি হয়। এবং গেলে পারে আপনি ওই পানির বোতল দিবে এবং দেখাবে যে কত পলিউটেড পানিকে আপনি পরিচ্ছন্ন করছেন। আর সৃষ্টিকর্তা বা প্রকৃতি যাই বলেন, আমাদেরকে প্রায় 4 থেকে 5 মাস অজস্র ধারায় বৃষ্টি দিচ্ছে, আমরা সেটাকে রাস্তাকে নদী বানানোর জন্য পার করছি। বহু বছর থেকে আমরা বলে আসছি আসেন আমরা এই বৃষ্টির পানিটিকে সংরক্ষণ করি। আপনি বৃষ্টির পানিকে সংরক্ষণ করলে ওয়াটার বিল 50% আপনার কমে যাবে। কেন আমরা করি না? এই জায়গাগুলিতে আমাদের কাজ দিতে হবে, সাধারণ মানুষকে এই কাজ করাতে হবে। গ্রামের মানুষ কিন্তু এখনো চালের পানি নিয়ে 2 ঘন্টা আধা ঘন্টা 1 ঘন্টা পরেই তারা এই বৃষ্টির পানি কালেকশন করা শুরু করে বহু বাড়িতে। কারণ দিস আর দ্য সুইট ওয়াটার। কারণ গ্রামে ইরিগেশন করার কারণে আপনার আন্ডারগ্রাউন্ড পানি ড্রিঙ্কিং অবস্থায় নাই, তাহলে তারা ড্রিঙ্কিং ওয়াটারটা পাচ্ছে কোথায়? আইদার পুকুরের পানি, যেটাতে আয়রনের পার্সেন্টেজ অসম্ভব বেশি, আর না হলে বৃষ্টির পানি মাটির বড় বড় ড্যাগে প্রিজার্ভ করে সেই বৃষ্টির পানিটি খাচ্ছে। অর্থাৎ নেচারকে ব্যবহার করার ক্ষমতা বাংলাদেশের মানুষের ভিতরে অসম্ভব রকম বেশি। বাংলাদেশের মানুষের ভিতরে সততা অনেক বেশি। আপনি যদি তাকিয়ে দেখেন যে 6 ঘন্টা 7 ঘন্টা নিউ ইয়র্কের মতন সভ্য রাষ্ট্রে 6 ঘন্টা 7 ঘন্টা বিদ্যুৎ ছিল না। পৃথিবীর হাইস্ট রেপ, রবারি, সব রবারি, কিলিং 6 ঘন্টা হয়েছে। বাংলাদেশে কত ঘন্টা বিদ্যুৎ থাকে না, তারপরে তো এই ধরনের ঘটনা ঘটে না। সেখানে ফ্লাড হলে পারে ন্যাশনাল গার্ড দিয়ে চুরি চামারি বন্ধ করতে হয়। আর বাংলাদেশের মানুষ, সাধারণ মানুষ, ফ্লাড হলে পারে তার নিজের যা আছে তার একটা অংশ নিয়ে ওই ফ্লাড এফেক্টেড এলাকায় দৌড়ে যায় মানুষকে দেওয়ার জন্য। এই যে ঐশ্বর্য বাংলাদেশের মানুষের মধ্যে রয়েছে, সেই ঐশ্বর্য নিয়ে আমাদের একটু যুদ্ধ করতে হবে। ঐশ্বর্যকে কিভাবে ব্যবহার করা যায় আরো সঠিকভাবে, সেই জায়গাগুলিতে যদি আমরা পৌঁছাতে পারি। আমি আতিক ভাইয়ের সেই কথাতে আবার আসবো, কোভিডও গ্লোবাল এবং ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জও গ্লোবাল। কিন্তু কোভিডকে আমরা আমাদের জনগণ নিজেদের ভিতরে ধারণ করে নিয়েছে। কিভাবে নিয়েছে আমি সায়েন্টিস্ট না, আমি মনে করি যারা রিসার্চ করেন তাদেরকে বের করতে হবে। 6-7টা গ্রামে যে একই চেহারা দেখেছি, কাউকে মাস্ক করতে শুনি না, তারা খেলছে, ওয়াজ করছে, গল্প করছে, গলাগলি করছে এবং তারা সরাসরি বলছে ভাই আপনি শহর থেকে আসছেন, আপনি দূরে থাকেন, আপনি দূর থেকে আমার সাথে কথা বলেন। দিস ইজ সামথিং এক্সেপশনাল। এই জায়গাটিকে নিয়ে আমাদের চর্চা করা দরকার, আমাদের আলোচনা করা দরকার এবং এই তথ্যগুলি বের করতে পারলে আমরা কিন্তু আমাদেরকে আরো অনেক দিক থেকে উন্নত করতে পারবো। আপনাকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ আমাকে সুযোগ দেওয়ার জন্য। আপনি আনমিউট করে নেন, জিল্লুর আনমিউট করে নেন।
Thank you, Mr. Mubashir-Sen, for your valuable speech. Dr. Atik Rahman, if you have any final words, please go on.
Yeah,
Dr. Atik Rahman.
I'll be short. The whole climate change issue is, as Professor Manal rightly said, that it is a global justice issue. In my last 20 years, I have done a lot of work on climate justice. And now it is not only the climate change is not only a justice issue, it's the greatest market failure. We talk of market, economists try to improvise market, and they say market will solve all our problems. Climate change is the greatest market failure, because what the production system has done, our life as a production system has done, is we have externalized the energy that we use and the waste that come out. And in this case, the waste are the greenhouse gases. They come out from our system, we don't pay for that. We don't pay for that pollution. So not paying for that pollution has created this mammoth problem, which goes into the atmosphere, gets mixed up. In the atmosphere, the molecule that comes from the rich, which is 98% or 96%, they don't write down this is the molecule from the rich. And the molecule from the poor also gets there, few, but when they get mixed up and come to hit me and warm up the world, and we get the impact in terms of extreme events, those extreme events are direct impact of how much greenhouse gas has come out. And the amount of greenhouse gas is higher, the richer the country has been. And I have had debates with heads of government, scientists at the United Nations level from rich countries who said, okay, we have done it in the past. Now let's forget it. Let's try and equalize responsibility. And I said, no. They said, well, what can I do with New York? I said, New York is the epitome of your success, and you're creating and you're present what we call climate colonialism. It's a new type of colonialism. While we have used the rich is becoming richer because we have got the historical investment of greenhouse gas. That is what has enabled you to become rich. Now you are using that rich to do business with me, buy my product at a cheap rate, and then sell it back to me. And all that. So the whole climate phenomenon is a function of the failure of the market in the first place. We have to make those huge justice correction for those, we are demanding compensation. There is a whole debate going on in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change debate called loss and damage. There comes a point after which adaptation will not be possible. Let's say one area, that the point that Zillur had made, that how many people get displaced. Many people get displaced from their homes, and every year in Bangladesh, temporarily, permanently, because climate change has hit them so bad that they cannot live anymore. Their areas have been totally destroyed. Their economic potential of agricultural growth has been destroyed. They have to move. That is the limit of adaptation once they retreat. Once the adaptation limit comes, in the UN jargon, what is called loss and damage. What has been lost and damaged, somebody has to take responsibility. And the rich countries have put in the United Nations, we will not talk this matter of the loss and damage, provided you raise the issue of compensation or attribution. So what happens is, I cannot say who has done it, that is attribution, and I cannot ask for money because you have destroyed my economy. So they're saying these are the two things you can't discuss. No talk areas. Now we are trying to see that science says that this is what is happening. I will not ask who is going to give money. You have to give us money, because funding is what we need for our next development process, in which we have to justifiably and through economic justice move forward. And that is the sustainable development, which is the central issue of today now, globally now, is economic growth. There must be economic growth everywhere to keep the economic system going. But that economic growth must be environmentally sound. So it has to incorporate. So in environmental justice, climate justice is central. So it has to be environmentally sound and socially just. So there has to be social justice built into the system. These three things, economic growth, environmental stability, and environmental justice, and social integrity and justice. Integration of these three is what makes sustainable development. And as we know, we are going towards the 17 the sustainable development goals that has been integrated. And in Bangladesh, as I said, poverty must be eradicated as our first objective. And earlier we can do that, better we will be able to contribute. And as we see, we all know that by 2041, we will be a moderately rich country to have access all these and give the poor people their right to survive in a dignified, in a way, so that they can contribute to the society. We want to contribute to the society of the global society as a whole, so that the Americans learn and understand what climate change is. People ask me, why do you teach in an American university? I said I go to American University for two things. One, to learn from the students and others. Second, to teach the policymakers there that they have to change their world, understanding what is happening to the outer world, not just your little state of New York, what happens, or in Los Angeles, or one other state, but global systems are interconnected. And climate change and also COVID have shown us the interconnectivity. Sadly, nobody wants to wish anybody ill, but the richest people could not help themselves from COVID. The number of deaths in USA has already crossed 500,000 now. So those are, of course, the main reason is they are looking after the elderly in the hospitals, the elderly who are dying most. And on the other hand, society must be able to manage their own, looking after their people, their ecosystems, their productive systems, so that we can go ahead, as Dr. Mawasha has rightly said, that our agricultural productivity has increased by 4 times, while our population has been only 1.5 times, 1 to 2 times more than what we had before. So from in the last 70 years, we can use that and squeeze time. Decadally, we can make these progresses, and hopefully by 2041, we'll have a much richer country, almost minimum poverty and highest amount of social justice. So all those get integrated, and that's why we fight about climate justice, because justice is an issue that doesn't come easily. I'm sure Rizwana will say a bit more about that from the legal perspective. Let me stop there and hand it over to Zillur for carrying on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atik Rahman. We are glad that Ms. Rizwana Hassan joined us again. Now, I would like to request Ms. Soeda Rizwana Hassan, Chief Executive Bangladesh Environmental Lawyers Association, BELA, to deliver her speech. Ms. Rizwana Hassan, it's over to you.
I don't really have a speech, Zillur Bhai. I'm actually in the middle of a court hearing. I've just took a break for 3 minutes. Just wanted to highlight on a few issues. Apologies to the earlier speakers, my previous speakers.
Could you please turn on your video? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, unmute your.
Oh, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So apologies to you all for not being able to listen to your valuable deliberations. I think what's most important for Bangladesh, for a fast developing country like Bangladesh, is to take lessons both from the climatic changes that are happening and also from the experiences of this pandemic. We often hear that we are world leader also in managing the pandemic, but that perhaps is not the case. So we should not be very complacent about what we have done in handling the pandemic. I think there was a divine blessing somewhere, and probably nature also had a role to play to keep it to a minimum for countries like ours. So instead of being very satisfied about our achievement in handling the pandemic, it's important to really think about, what should be the ways forward, so that in case there is similar crisis in future, how we would handle it. So it's about developing resilience, not only of your people, but also of the system. I think for Bangladesh, it's very important that we rethink our development model. We are blindly following the exploitative development model of the Western countries. And the exploitative development models of the Western countries have actually given us this crisis of climate change, which is threatening the existence of the entire globe. So we should not be blindly following those countries in pursuing our development agenda, because those were very exploitative and they failed to do any justice to the mother world. When we talk about environmental justice and climate justice, we must ensure that no system of justice will be attained unless you improve your governance. Here, every development decision is being taken by the higher tier of the administration. The development decisions are not being taken in inclusive manner, and no participation of common people at all. Rather, the development is very top down, and these things are being imposed on us. We are having a metro rail, which probably is a welcoming decision, I do not know, but we haven't managed to really discipline the existing public transportation sector. So without disciplining the existing sector, we are investing huge amount of money for having another modern system which we don't know how we'll be able to deal with. So governance has to be inclusive and participatory. Whatever development we choose, we must ensure that those development models, those development projects do not create extra pressure on the existing natural resource basis. Because if that is done, then when we start doing our adaptation process, the scope for us to go for nature-based solution will be further limited. We have many resources, but compared to the number of people we have, those are not huge natural resource bases. So whatever natural resource bases we have to protect those, so that when we have to adapt for climate changes, we can rely for nature-based solution instead of asking for heavily technology-based solution or or solutions that are heavily dependent on investment of money. We do not have that much of money, nor do we have holdover technology. We must avoid false solutions, for example, the GM food and everything, and we must change our consumption pattern. For that, developing leadership in the youth is important, and we must concentrate in protecting our agricultural system, our water system, forest and health system, because those are areas that will be hard hit by climate changes and pandemics like this. Sorry, I have to now rush to the.
Thank you.
Good luck. We'll go and win the job, win the case.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Advocate Sadar Rizwan Hasan, for your time and thoughts.
Mubashir bhai, কিছু বলবেন?
Would you please, Dr. Atik Rahman, would you like to add something?
No, Mubashir bhai বলতে কিছু, Architect Mubashir wants to say something, I think.
Yes, please, Mr. Mubashir Hussain.
আমার কাছে রিজওয়ানের একটা কথা খুব ভালো লেগেছে, যেটা সত্যিকার অর্থে এক্সপ্লয়েটিং ডেভেলপমেন্ট। অর্থাৎ বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ডেভেলপমেন্ট হচ্ছে, কিন্তু সাধারণ মানুষকে এক্সপ্লয়েট করে। এবং এই যে ট্রান্সপোর্ট নিয়ে আমরা কত আলাপ করছি, যে এক্সিস্টিংটাকেই আমি যদি ঠিক করি তাহলে আমরা কত সুযোগ সুবিধা করতে পারি। এবং ঢাকা শহর নিয়ে আমরা অসংখ্য স্টাডি করেছি। ঢাকা শহরের সমস্ত কিছু আপনার 3 থেকে 3.5 কিলোমিটার রেডিয়াসের ভিতরে এভরিথিং ইজ অ্যাভেলেবল। আমরা বিদেশে উন্নত জায়গায় যাদের বিলিয়নিয়ারদেরকে দেখেছি 2.5 থেকে 3 কিলোমিটার তাকে দৈনিক হাঁটতে হয়। অর্থাৎ গাড়িটি কিন্তু ড্রয়িং রুমে ঢোকে না, আমাদের প্রায় ড্রয়িং রুমে গাড়ি ঢোকায়। একজন ডিসেবলকে 1.5 কিলোমিটার পর্যন্ত নিজে হুইল চেয়ার মুভ করাতে হয়। এগুলো আমাদের স্টাডি থেকে আমরা বলছি। ঢাকা শহরে আমার গাড়ি আমার একেবারে ড্রয়িং রুমে নেওয়া ছাড়া আর কোনো উপায় নাই। এই পদ্ধতিতে আমরা চলি, যে কারণে এই নেতা নেত্রীদেরকে যদি আমি ফুটপাতে হাঁটাতে পারতাম, বাংলাদেশের ফুটপাত পৃথিবীর শ্রেষ্ঠতম ফুটপাত হতো। এই গাড়ি তারা নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন, শুধু নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন না, চিফ জাস্টিসের বাড়ির সামনে দিয়ে উল্টা দিকে গাড়ি নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন। চিফ জাস্টিস বিভিন্ন সময় কি বলে নিজে থেকে কেস করেন, কিন্তু এই মানুষগুলিকে কেস করেন না, স্বপ্রণোদিত হয়ে কেস এদের বিরুদ্ধে করেন না। বহুবার আমি বলেছি, আমাকে অন্তত এটার জন্য যদি জবাবদিহিও করতে বলতো, আমি জানতে চাইতাম যে আমাকে কি জন্য শাস্তি দেওয়া হলো, সেটিও অনুগ্রহ করে লেখেন। অসহায় চিফ জাস্টিস ব্যালকনিতে দাঁড়িয়ে দেখেন যে তার দরজার সামনে দিয়ে উল্টা দিকে গাড়ি নিয়ে যাচ্ছে ফ্ল্যাগালা গাড়ি। আপনি এই জায়গাগুলিকে যদি ঠিক না করতে পারেন, আমাদের এই কৃষকদের উপরই নির্ভর করতে হবে, ওদেরটাকেই আমাদের ফলো করতে হবে। কারণ চিন্তা করেন যে আমরা এই কৃষকরা 71-এর মুক্তিযুদ্ধের চেয়েও বড় যুদ্ধ কিন্তু তারা করে ফেলেছে, যেটা আমরা কেউ জানি না, কেউ বুঝি না। একটি বিধ্বস্ত রাষ্ট্রের জমি কমে গেছে, জনসংখ্যা দ্বিগুণ হয়েছে, সেটাকে কিভাবে তারা সামাল দিল আমার কাছে এখনো চিন্তার বিষয় মনে হয়। এইগুলি যদি করা সম্ভব হয়, তখন আমি মনে করি বাংলাদেশ চাইলেই বহু কিছু করতে পারে। শুধুমাত্র ওই যে টপ ডাউনের বদলে নিচে থেকে যদি আমি উপরে উঠি, তাহলে আমরা এই প্রবলেমগুলি সুন্দরভাবে সমাধান করতে পারব।
And governance is a big challenge here.
Exactly. Main challenge to it.
Dr. Atik Rahman, please.
Yes, coming back to the whole question of governance, we have rules, and one of the fundamental rules says that rules are equal for everybody. And the point that Mubashir bhai has said, that rules are not equal for everybody. The day we do that, the poor farmer, the poor person. The government's allocation for COVID period, allocation for various groups have been quite significant. But it is only the rich group, whether they're the garment industry, big enterprises, they got the money. The poor farmers didn't get that much. Allocation is there, but the distributed system could not reach them that well. So we have to learn to do our distributed system better. And governance principle is reaching all the parts of the body. And when we imagine a human body and we want to supply oxygen, if we do it only to the head, it doesn't work. The whole body must get it. And how do we get it to the body? Our toes must get it, otherwise we don't walk. Our fingers must get it so that we can eat. So the point is, how do we get this? Analogy is the way to make sure that our extremes, our poorest, they get the benefit of this progress, that quote unquote progress that we are making. And this progress is not about roads. Of course, roads are very welcome. Of course, Padma Bridge is most welcome for the people of Khulna, Joshua, Bodishal, Patuakhali and all. But they must reach the people, all of them, with benefits. And one of the things that has happened because of climate change and COVID at the same time, many of the children could not go to their schools. You see, so, one of the positive things that solar energy has done and given light is because of the light in the evening for 4 hours, the children could do their homework and go to their school next day. So this whole reason for getting a little young girl to school changes her whole life. Once she has done 8 years or 10 years in school, it is very difficult to get her married at the age of 13 or 14. So society has to transform ourselves rapidly in those areas. On our top side, we have to do better governance, better rules and regulations. On the bottom side, there must be greater access of justice, of facilities, of system. Climate change will be there. By wishing climate change away, it's not going to go away. COVID impact, how long COVID will go, how long we'll have to put masks on. And I think for the pollution that we have, mask is our best solution, because we are not going to reduce the pollution that well. So save ourselves, save our children at home. Mask is a great, great solution. Let's not ignore it. And for COVID, we have to take our vaccination, and Bangladesh has done wonderfully well in vaccination governance. Let's move on with that, making sure everybody gets it. We are giving, we're the poorest, one of the poorest countries, giving free vaccination to every citizen is a wonderful, and I'm proud of it. So let that be effective, and all the lessons we are learning from COVID in terms of how do we interact with people, how do we put masks on, how we protect our health. At the same time, climate change is going to be there. Those combinations, we have to put our governance system into these long-lasting problematic areas or complicated areas in which multiplicity, and we are not in a position to choose our problems. We have the problems, we have to live with it, but we are in a position to better our governance. That we can do by our politics, by our social justice system, by our access to population, by opening our doors, increasing digitization, and all those processes. So I see a very good progressive Bangladesh future, which can be an example how nation overcome their problems. Singapore has been mentioned. When I was in Singapore to receive one of my awards, the Prime Minister said, would you help us to design Singapore roads a bit better? I said, look, I dare not, but I'm happy to read the paper. I wrote the paper. I said, look, you have done textbook planning. When I go in the car in the Singapore road, I do not see a drain clogged. I don't see a road, a tree. Every tree is kept clean and nice and working. So, I said, I can't do any more better. Please don't try to pay me because you have done textbook standards. So we can do textbook standards within our Bangladesh. We have the experts we have the quality people. It's a question of giving them the right responsibility and maybe move on. And governance, one of the basic principles of governance is that let the right people do their right job. Let not politicians try to do all the jobs. There are experts, there are groups, there are professionals, let the journalists do good journalism and let there be good oversight. Same with everything. And if we can do that, we'll be in a better future with all the problems that we have. And I look forward to a much better Bangladesh and much brighter Bangladesh. I'm pretty confident that's what will happen. Let me stop there.
Great, sir. Thank you again, Dr. Atik Rahman, for your time and thoughts and for the great presentation. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and our thanks to all the speakers, Architect Mubashir Hussain, Dr. Munjir Ahmed Choudhury, and Advocate Rizwana Hassan, to my colleagues at the CGS and my colleagues from the media. So this concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you have enjoyed this session. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you.